start off with our questions. The first one is, who or what got you into racing, Pat?
My friend, I used to drag race and on the street and at some of the area tracks in Ohio and Maryland. But anyways, he kept prodding me. And my buddy Donnie Clemick said, anybody can drive in a straight line. Well, that kind of really got under my skin, so guess what? I had to show him. So I went out and bought this 34 Ford car that didn't have a motor or tranny in it, and I started racing. So he's the one that got me started, only because he gave me a challenge.
All right, Dad?
Well, what got me into racing was I didn't have a choice as a kid. I had to go to the races. I mean, that was it. So obviously the guy sitting there in the white hair is the one that got me into racing. No, I mean, some of my earliest memories from childhood were actually one of my earliest childhood memories was Dad running in the Stony 200 back in 1972, I believe it was. I'd been 4 years old, and I remember sitting in the grandstands with Mom during that race. And so anyway, yeah, that's what got me into racing.
So now what got me into racing is the gray-haired one over here that I've been helping out around here, and then wanted to get in a car, and then got a car and got into it. Alright, so we'll go on to the next question, starting with Pap again. What is the favorite track that you have raced at?
No question about it. My home track, and the one I love so much, is Jennerstown. But I always favored a big track with high bank. And Motordrome fit into that just like a kid glove. All the other tracks that I ever ran into all over the country, they were flat tracks. But Motordrome, I'm going to have to say, and I hate to take it away from Jennerstown, because Jennerstown, you know, I always treated that as my home track, but Motordrome was the one that really hit down here.
Dad?
Honestly, I would have to say I probably have 3 favorite tracks, and I mean, all of them for different reasons. Probably one of my favorite tracks I ran in Salem, Indiana, and that thing is, for those not familiar with it, it's very, very similar to Bristol. And that was just, I ran that in a Hooters Procup car, and you know, I just love the track. And I've added up here over the years, I've competed at 47 racetracks in my lifetime so far. I want to get to 50 before I retire, but that was one of them. That was one of my favorites, just because of the high banking, the high speeds in the Hooters Procup car. Another one that I really liked was Erie, because of the progressive banking they had at Erie. You can run the outside of Erie, even though it's a small 3/8 mile track. You can run the outside of Erie all the time, and you know, get around the guy on your inside. And then my favorite dirt track, since I've done both, honestly, I'd have to say is McKean County Speedway, and only not because of anything else other than I've always had good runs there. There's a lot of dirt tracks I like, but McKean, I've always just done really well there. So that's the 3 I'd have to say are my favorites.
It's kind of hard to have a favorite for me, just because I've only raced at one track, so I'd have to say Jennerstown, but that's where I stand on it, so hopefully we'll get out and get to some different asphalt tracks in the future. The next one is, what year did you start racing, and in what car? My racing career on the oval, started in 1959. And the first track I went to was up at Evansburg Fairgrounds, it was called. But this is the one I just bought. This guy ran this car before. He was local, but he had just the car sitting out in the field and didn't have a motor, didn't have a tranny, and the rest of the body was good. It was beat up, but I didn't care, you know, because I was going to beat it up more, I figured. So I ended up putting a Ford flathead motor in it, and which is what was in the car before. And I started my career with that 34 Ford with a flathead Ford motor in it.
And you're telling me you ran a Ford?
Well, I know, everybody questions that. You know, they know me. Anybody who knows me in today knows, you know, Chevy. Well, the Ford thing came about. I'm not quite sure exactly how it came about, but my dad was a dealer from Supus Ford in Johnstown. He was what was called a sub-dealer. And so he sold Fords. He sold brand new Fords and serviced them, and I did drive Fords, but then he switched over. He bought the Chevy dealership in Wimber in 1960, I believe it was, and I switched over. I switched over to Chevys.
Thank goodness you did. All right.
There was also that, you know, there was a term for that, you know. Yeah, they call it young and dumb, and then you become smart. You know, well, there you go. He started out in the Ford and worked his way, got a little bit smarter, and worked his way into the Chevy.
Well, one thing I noticed about Chevy, the first thing I noticed about Chevy was Chevy had more power. I know you Ford guys are going to beat me over the head for it, but Chevy, back in those days, anyways, the Chevys that I drove had more power than a Ford.
All right, same question of what year and what car did you start in?
My first car was actually one of his old cars. It was I graduated high school in '86, and then after my mother wouldn't allow me to race until I went to college, I enrolled in college and started racing at Allendora Speedway, local track right here, and in the dirt. It was a 1981 March chassis that my dad finished racing in, and I ran it around there. I started out in the late model class at Limber, and that's what we ran.
So my racing career started in 2018, and it was in a chassis that was as old as me, so it would have been in early 2000s, around the 2002 is what we predicted the ancient thing was. But it was an old Peter Causalino late model that we bought and put it together and ran at Jennerstown. All right, so the next question is, what is one track that you've always wanted to race?
Wow. I'm going to have to say there never was a track that I wanted to race, because when I raced, I raced any place that had a track that was favorable to my car that I used. And at that time, we had a newspaper called, I think, Area Auto Racing News or something like that. And one of the pit crew would be reading it, and they said, hey, there's a track up in, Timbuktu, and they're running a special race. We didn't have GPS or nothing like that. We had a map and we had a phone number where we called. So we raced every track that was available to us. So there wasn't a track out there that I can say that, boy, I missed it, I wish I did. But no, unfortunately I can't give you that answer. But we raced anything and everywhere.
One track that you wanted to race?
Well, the one track on asphalt that I've always wanted to race was Bristol. Got close at Salem, Indiana, and we contemplated when I was running the Slim Jim All Pro Series and even in the Hooters Procup car about running Bristol. Just timing, funds, and everything else, we just never got there. From a dirt standpoint, probably, I never really thought about it because I've raced all the dirt tracks around that I really cared to, but I guess just from a prestige standpoint, Eldora Speedway up in Ohio, just because of how famous the track is. Since I've run all the ones around here, I guess if I wanted to get to one, that might be it for dirt.
All right, and the one that I've wanted to is actually the same as his for asphalt, and that would be Bristol, just because of the high banking and the speeds. They actually run the asphalt late models, a slightly different chassis, but that's going to probably be a cool track to run and maybe try and get there, but got to definitely be willing to risk a car for everything there.
Geez, I got one up on my son. I did get a race at Eldora Speedway. I was lucky enough to get there. Unfortunately, got into the race. There was 140 some cars qualified that day I was there. I qualified 10th. And I forget, I think I put 60 laps on, and the rear end went out. So I can't tell you a good story about Eldora, but anyways, he wanted to race there, but I already did.
Not to brag or anything.
Hey,
All right, Pap, I know we already kind of touched on this about why did you switch from selling Fords to Chevys?
once again, in the business world, we weren't actually a Ford dealer, but back then, they allowed a Ford dealer to set up somebody and call them a sub-dealer. And my dad was good friends with Mr. Supas, and they worked out a deal to put the car in the showroom, and it was up to my dad to service the car and do the warranty work and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know to this day what made my dad go Chevy, but the Chevy dealership in Wimmer became available. And the guy was named Mr. Schaefer, and he didn't want the dealership anymore, so him and my dad worked out a deal. Dad rented a building off of Mr. Schaefer, and that was the start of Chevy land for me.
All right. Now, Dad, this is just for you. Any desire to race me on asphalt?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That way you could fix both cars.
Wow.
I never thought of that.
No, I'd absolutely love to do that
That would-
someday, but, you know, that,
Maybe in the future.
yeah, maybe we'll get there someday.
All right, so the next question is actually for myself, and is what are my goals for the 2020 season? Being that we have a newer car, keep it in one piece, but also be competitive at the same time. I want to keep learning about it and learning how we can adjust on this car, just because there's 1,000 different adjustments that you can do, and learning what each and every one of them does is very important. That way I can relate to both him, my pap, and my brother, my spotter, who helps out. That way I can tell them what's going on with the car and be able to speak kind of the same race car language, as if you want to call it that, to them and let them know what's going on. My future goals in racing, well, I have a lot of dreams. Now there's a difference between dreams and goals, but just keep moving up and try to get better every year. Now, whether that's in the same exact car here, the late model, or on dirt in a sprint car, that's a bucket list challenge right there, is definitely a sprint car one day. But I'd like to maybe try a little bit of the higher end of the asphalt community and keep going up, maybe like ARCA or something like that. All right, so Dad, what exactly do you do at the race shops on Saturdays? And this is asked by my mom, or your wife.
Well, if you ask the pit crew, all I do is give orders and direct everybody.
Pretty close.
But this stuff doesn't get built on its own, and that is one thing I think we can pride ourselves on from a whole team. Everybody that's been involved in this race team over the years, and I mean there have been a lot of them. Every one of the guys that have helped me out have helped us out now. Have spent a lot of hours at the shop bolting this stuff together. These race cars, the dirt car, the asphalt car. They don't get built on their own, and it takes a lot of man hours, a lot of effort. Everybody may think I just sit around and think about things and direct orders, but there's still a lot of evenings and a lot of time involved in putting these things together. And like I said, I'm proud to say that we don't pay anybody to do the work on our cars. We do all the work ourselves, bolting them together. I mean, some of the real specialized stuff, like maybe motor building, we do have some local guys that help us out. But other than that, we bolt everything together. So there is a lot of time invested there.
All right, and then this one's to all of us. We'll start with you, Pap. Who is your biggest fan?
Oh my gosh. There is only one answer to that, and that's my wife, Patty. Okay, your Grammy. I think out of the 23 years that I raced around the country. And the best to my knowledge that I came up with, and she only missed 6 races out of the 23 years. Now, in saying that, you say, well, that's not too bad, but if you remember that Rob said something about the family being at the racetrack, well, once the kids got old enough, at least they can walk. Grammy took the kids to every racetrack that she was at. She would babysit them and, you know, put them up in the highest part of the bleachers because she traveled with me and the race car always had to get there early. So we beat most of the fans. So she had a choice of seating. And that was one thing she took care of. She took care of my son and 2 daughters. So my biggest fan, I have to say, just my wife.
Well, believe it or not, and I'd have to, my answer is the same. My wife, Chris, those of you who know us well have heard the story about how we met. I won't put it on video here and embarrass my wife, but let's just say she was a pretty big fan at the races, and I ended up, I met her at the races, but formally met her a few months later on a college campus, and kind of the rest was history. We've been been together ever since. So yeah, I would have to say my wife Chris is definitely my biggest fan. So she's been there for the number of years, and of course, as she asked the question, all of the hours I spent at the race shop and whatnot, she's been around for all of them and helped out. I mean, you can go on our website and find pictures of her washing the dirt cars. She painted, she helped paint the race cars, she helped wash them, she helped build them. So yeah, she's definitely be my biggest fan.
My biggest fans are, well, I don't have one in particular, but it's all of my family and friends. They always come out and support me. There's at least every week, and I try to always go over and, you know, see everybody and say hi, but if we're busy every week, it's kind of hard, but I always try to make time and go over. But there's at least 15, if not 20 people in the stands all sitting together, all family, all friends, my mom, my Grammy, my couple of close friends that just, some of them, you know, don't even like racing, but they just go there because they're my friends, and all the pit crew that, you know, their relatives and family come and they support me. So all of them and whatnot. So it's just, it's fun more than anything, just getting everybody together and whatnot. All right, so this one's to you two, because I've not been driving long enough for this. But we'll start with you, Pap, once again. Who was your biggest rival?
If you were local, and I'm talking about Jennerstown, Bedford, back then it was Everett, the fans up in the grandstands, they made my rival, Larry Wright. Of course, he drove a Ford, I drove a Chevy. His was red and white, mine was purple. And they made me a rival to Larry, and Larry a rival to me. So I gotta say, it came from the fans, okay, believe it or not. So Larry Wright, I have to put him out there, and if you asked anybody that ran local, you'll find out Larry Wright name coming up with Bobby Marhefka.
Dad, who was yours?
Well, I can honestly say after the first couple of years of racing, I started, doing a lot of touring series races. So we kind of moved around from track to track. So I, unlike, the way my dad raced, I didn't race the same track weekly a whole lot. We did it early on and in the beginning. So I didn't have a lot of rivalries, but early on, probably one of the biggest rivals I had, it was probably my second and third, fourth year of racing down at Eldora Speedway, was a guy named Randy Kimmel. Randy was winning a lot, and I was just up and coming, and him and I, tangled a couple of times on the track, and we had a couple of good on-track battles, and I'll kind of leave it at that. But so I'd have to say Randy Kimmel would have been probably one of my, biggest rivals. And again, it was early on in my racing career, because after I started moving to the stuff like the Procup series and the Slim Jim All Pro series, you race against different drivers. I mean, I've had issues with drivers, but not what you would call a rivalry.
Yeah. All right, Pat, we'll start with you again on this, and this is for both of you. What was the biggest win of your career, or what would you maybe say is your most charitable, one?
Absolutely. All the big races that was held at Jennerstown and Motordrome. Jennerstown always had the 100 lapper, but then Motordrome came up with an idea, let's make a race up here with 200 laps. So I did win, I think it was the second race that they ran, second year that they ran. But I guess I'm going to have to put Motordrome at the top of the list there, only because Jennerstown never ran that big of a event. And I loved racing. The longer the event went, the stronger I got. I don't know what it was. Other guys would say, man, 100 laps, I'm done. But I always enjoyed that longer race.
All right, Dad, what was also your favorite, or biggest, or most cherishable win?
Definitely I'd have to give that one to Jennerstown Speedway. Jennerstown had, as my dad pointed out, they had the 100 lappers, and I won. Not only did I win, I led every lap except the very first lap. I started on the outside pole, and the only lap I didn't lead was lap 1, but I led the next 99 laps. And by far, that was definitely we just had the car, we worked on the car all day in practice, and we just got it just hit it right, and led all 99 laps, and I was pretty proud of that win, so I was happy with that. And like my dad, I enjoyed the longer races. I always enjoyed running in the the Procup series with the 200 and some lap races. So, but the Jennerstown race is definitely my the most memorable one.
All right, so with that in mind, now one of the races that I would like to win the most is probably the Motor Mountain Masters, just because it's becoming bigger and bigger over the past. Well, it started 2 years ago, but it's just becoming bigger and bigger. Last year, I kind of raced my way in through the heat race and got lucky and didn't have to race in the B main, and was hung out there and was able to advance a little bit, but then got kind of stagnant on a lap by myself. But if I was able to win any race, it'd be that. It's 150 laps, but it's not straight through like they were talking. It's into 3 different segments, and they get longer as you go, but it's only a 5-minute break to make sure you can maybe put on tires and put a little bit of fuel in the car. But definitely the Motor Mountain Masters at Jennerstown, just because it's the home track and we have so much history there, that would be one on the definite one to win. All right, so this one's for all of us, but mainly applies to both of you. But the past 2 years, it kind of maybe excelled in my part. But most well-known driver that you have ever competed against, Pat? Would it be like a NASCAR driver, maybe more of a well-known, local guy? But
wow. I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that question. Every time that I crawled inside a race car, no matter who he was somebody that I wanted to beat. So I really can't truthfully answer that question. I just can't.
all right. Dad, who of you could be? I know there's a couple of them, but
Well, yeah, that and a couple guys that have gone on to some bigger and better things. Mainly, I think most of them, some of them came from the Slim Jim All Pro series. One that comes to mind is David Ruderman. Him and I competed together in Greenville Pickens. And but the other one is in the USAR Procup series. When I got out of that series, we were competing on a weekly, on a race, not a weekly basis, but maybe a bi-weekly basis, against about six I think there were 6 or 7 Cup teams that had developmental drivers in them, and one of the developmental drivers was Joey Logano. So I was on the track with him, as well as Jimmy Spencer had a team, Tony Stewart had a team, Joe Gibbs, which that's who I think Joe Logano was driving for, Rusty Wallace, he had a team. So yeah, there was a number of them. But Joey Logano went on to probably become the most successful of all those drivers that I actually competed against. So.
One of the most well-known drivers that I have maybe started to compete against was, he just kind of started here a couple of weeks ago at Jennerstown, is Cale Gale. He's a former NASCAR guy. I'm not real sure on his history, but he was in NASCAR at one point and did win a race or two here and there. But that would definitely be the most well-known that I have competed against. All right, I haven't been in too many of these, but I know you two really like to destroy cars. So what's the worst crash of your career, Pat?
Oh, it's got to be at Eldora Speedway. We had an invitational there, and I can't remember exactly how many laps it was, but the track was very dusty, no question about it. And I came out of turn 4, and one of the Pittsburgh drivers, and I'm not sure exactly who it was, I can't remember, but he got me on my left rear quarter panel and spun me out, and I ended up against the wall in front of the flagman, facing traffic. And this driver, Paul Fess, he couldn't see either. I mean, we couldn't see. It was so dusty. But I was up against the fence or the wall, and I was ready to hit my seat belts and get out, because I can jump over the wall. I wanted to get out of there, man. I'm facing traffic, it's head on. Well, if you ever got in front of a race car that has a 4-barrel carburetor and all 4 barrels are wide open, that is the ugliest sound you will ever hear in your whole life. Well, Paul came off of turn 4, never seen me. It's dusty. He's trying to stay on the track. Paul hit me head on. That was probably the worst one. It drove my steering shaft and wheel, but it drove the steering shaft back 13 inches, pinned me up against the seat. I had a few broken bones from that. And not only was it a memory in my head about that race, but Paul needed an ambulance, and I needed an ambulance. Well, I wasn't very liked down in that area, so the ambulance that was at the track, they put Paul in first, of course, and they're not going to put me in first. Well, I guess what little bit I can remember about him, I'm waiting and waiting. Finally, transportation came. And since they didn't really care about me too much, the transportation was a hearse. I went to the hospital in a hearse. So everything checked out kind of right, but I said, well, you know, I do want to go back to my own hospital in Johnstown. But that was probably the worst. We since then made safety items on the steering column so the shaft wouldn't drive back so far. But anyways, that was my worst. And Paul Fess is a good friend of mine. He's still a good friend of mine. It wasn't his fault he couldn't see me. If he did, I'm sure he would have backed them 4 barrels off on the carburetor and slowed down a little bit before he hit me. They say the front end of my car went up in the air 10 feet. There was a fence there 8 to 10 feet in front of where I got parked. And they say when we hit, both cars just went up in the air. Destroyed my car. My car, there was nothing left of it. I mean, everything
everything there was junk, okay, so, but that was my worst.
And then probably followed by you trying to be a lumberjack at Bedford, taking out trees.
Yeah, that was a good one, but I can't remember that, and that one.
Oh, then it must have been a good one.
That,
I can't remember.
I can't remember. I remember being in the pits and getting ready to leave for that race. And that was the last, I think I lost 13 hours. I mean, I was good because my wife, went to the hospital in Bedford with me, and I'm talking to everybody, the doctors, the nurses that was on duty at that time. And I even drove home. I drove the car home. And she said I did good. And some deer jumped out. My reactions was good. But I woke up that morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I woke my wife up. I said, what happened? So I don't remember that race.
All right, Dad, now what was your worst crash?
I had two of them, and both of them were almost identical. One at Jennerstown Speedway on the front stretch wall, where I got parked in the left rear, hit the inside wall head on, and everybody, the whole pit crew was looking at the underside of the race car. I almost went over top the Jersey barrier. That was my first one, and the second one was just last year in a dirt car at Bedford. My wife was standing on the stage at Bedford, and pretty much it looked like I was coming up onto the stage at Bedford because she was looking at the underside of the dirt car. In both cases, I managed to come down on all four wheels, but both of them did some pretty significant damage to the cars. So that was my two biggest ones.
I'm a little bit nicer on our equipment, but so I backed into a wall a couple of times, but that's it. All right, so the next one, and this is for all of us, a driver that you looked up to as a kid. I don't know whether that would be like a NASCAR driver, maybe a local guy that you watched.
There's only one driver that I ever had in mind, and he was a NASCAR guy. But I can't, other than that, I don't have really anybody that I really looked up to.
For me, obviously spending so many days at a dirt track, watching my dad race, I wanted to follow in his footsteps. So, I definitely looked up to him and wanted to, carry on that legacy after I hopped behind the wheel. But, there was also one driver from the, and again, if you want to televise national driver, and I don't, Bobby Allison. And I think more than any reason was because his name was Bobby. But I followed Bobby Allison a lot on the NASCAR whenever NASCAR first started getting televised. I got to actually meet Bobby Allison down in Daytona back when I was about 12 years old, so that was kind of really pretty cool. But that would have been the two that I would have looked up to the most.
By the way, before you go, I forgot to mention was that one individual that I looked up to was Dale Earnhardt Jr. Or not senior, I'm sorry.
Say senior.
Senior, yeah, he was, that devastated me for a long time.
There's a couple drivers, obviously being these two, filling in for them, not filling in for them, but coming up after them. I've always looked up to them and, trying to be just as good, but won't ever be as good as both of them. But
You'll get there.
Trying to butter up father and grandfather, holy buckets.
But on the national level, Kyle Larson is the guy that I've always, looked up to. He can drive just about anything and anything. I mean, he's just a different breed whenever it comes to racing, and that's, something that you don't see very often. I know that we kind of just touched on this kind of in a sense, but your favorite race car driver? I mean, would that be also Dale Jr.?
Yeah, because I never put anybody on a pedestal because just for the fact that if they were in a race with me, they were just somebody I gotta beat, all right? If he was in front of me, I had to beat him. So, but Dale Earnhardt Sr. was my heartbeat as far as, you know, someone outside of our racing circuit.
I actually was a Dale Earnhardt fan as well. In fact, my second race car basically kind of copied his paint scheme, you know, back in the 80s with the GM Goodwrench car. But I was always a fan of Dale Earnhardt, and yeah, I loved the way he drove, loved the way he handled himself on the track and off the track. So yeah, Dale Earnhardt.
My favorite before Kyle Larson would have been Tony Stewart, but I did like the Dale Jr. and Dale Sr., but Dale Sr. was a little bit beyond my time. But Tony Stewart was definitely my go-to, just because my Grammy, your wife, liked him so much, but also just because Tony was almost the same exact person as Kyle Larson, as in he could drive anything. He had championships in different series and whatnot, but you know, and he was not afraid to speak his mind, kind of like me. So kind of being like him in a sense, maybe, but that could get you in trouble sometimes.
Boy, Brandon, you just made your Grammy happy.
All right, and this is actually our last question, and this is a good one. What is your favorite part of racing?
This is a very tough one to answer. And that's it.
For me, I mean, I kind of like that. I'm enjoying watching my son, you know, get behind the wheel and helping him out. From a personal level, as far as being on the track, and you know, I enjoy working on the race cars, but there is no thrill like the drop of the green flag. You know, there's a saying about out there, you know, when the green flag drops, the bullshit stops. I'll tell you what, that I absolutely love the adrenaline rush you get whenever you get that first green flag, and 20 plus cars, 25 cars, 24 cars go charging off down into turn one, and running side by side with a guy. But that is a part of the sport that you can't replicate anywhere, and I don't even know that other sports can replicate it. But I absolutely love that adrenaline rush.
I'm kind of in the same boat as him with the personal side of it being, you know, the adrenaline rush. You know, if you're an adrenaline junkie, that sure is your fix. But just getting all the family involved, anywhere from my mom helping out. You know, she helps us, you know, get stuff ready for the races all the time. My brother spotting for me, and then, you know, all the guys coming down and working on the cars, and it's almost just like we're one big family and enjoy spending time with each other, you know. But just, you know, knowing that everybody has your back and, you know, is willing to take their time out of the day and, you know, spend hours upon hours down here with us, and, you know, knowing that they're that, you know, generous and whatnot to help me. That's what I like best about it, and spending time with all of the people that, you know, if I didn't have racing, probably wouldn't be nearly as close to.
I'd like to add to that, Brandon. When I raced, Rob raced, he raced. The people that helped us worked on the cars, okay? No matter what you asked, they did it.
Yeah.
Same with me, same with Rob. So those people that worked so hard, invested all their time getting to the track and leaving the track and helping out in the track with the car, and those people, I can't say enough for these guys. There's no, you know, when you go up there and win a race, all right, the announcer hands you the checkered flag. They don't hand the pit crew a checkered flag. They should, but they don't.
Yep. Couldn't wouldn't get to the track without them, so.
Absolutely not. And, you know, the group of guys that have been around, at least, you know, for the entire time that I've been racing, and now are, you know, helping Brandon out as well. It's a privilege to work with them, given the fact that every member of our pit crew has raced at some point. So, you know, when you're talking about, you know, they know what racing is all about, and they all raced cars themselves at some point in some fashion. You know, they've all been behind the wheel, and for them to get behind you as a driver and help on your car, that's really something special that, you know, it's hard to put it into words, and it's hard to thank them for that, because you know, they understand it, and then it's great having them, because, you know, you put your trust into them that they're going to, you know, bolt the car together correctly, and, you know, you got to go out there and make a left turn, and there's a cement wall staring at you if you don't. So yeah, they're a big help, huge help.
Anything else?
Not that I have. I'm looking for a great 2020
Yeah.
grandson driving at Jennerstown, at least at this point in time. So I'm just hoping we have a great year, a safe year for all of us. And the safety factor, you know, I passed on to my son Rob passed it on to Brandon. Everything we learned safety-wise, we try to protect the driver as much as possible. So I hope we have a safe year. But once again, you know, it's not only us up in the driver's seat. We got all kind of protection, especially anymore with Brandon. But these guys in the pits could get hurt at any moment in time. Something, you know, a jack can slip, a wrench can get off in the wrong direction, and anything like that. They can come in contact with another car in the pit. So it's not only us. I'm hoping that, you know, same thing, our pit crew has a safe year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, we want to thank everybody that asked questions on Facebook, you know, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We'd like to also thank all of our sponsors, Allied Milk Producers, the Clarks, Memorial Highway Chevrolet, Burke Towing, and Edge Racing Engines. We would greatly appreciate if everybody would share this video. I mean, it's over right here. Over 60 years of racing history between the three of us, starting all the way back to him. So it's definitely a story, and we would love to keep telling it. If you guys ever have any more questions, please feel free to ask us on any of those platforms, and we will try and either answer them by message, or if we get enough, we can even do another one of these. I mean, just get everybody to sit back down and answer a couple more questions.
Sure. Yeah, it's always fun.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.